got some ladies in with us the next few months. My understanding that Libby is taking a break, teaching the classroom back after the first of the year. So we had to have ladies with us. We've been studying the book of Isaiah, the second half of the book, beginning this quarter with around chapter 40 to 42. And today's lesson covers Isaiah 46, beginning with verse 1 through 7, and chapter 47, verses 1 through 11. See that the lessons which we have been studying this quarter have been dealing with Isaiah's prophecy, especially the prophecy of the return of the people of Israel to Jerusalem to rebuild the city. The lessons begin, for review for those who haven't been in here, for this quarter. Lesson 1, Isaiah has been explaining to the Israelite people the prophecies that God has revealed unto him. The events that he's talking about, he talks about them as if they're happening right then, but they're not. These prophecies will not be fulfilled for another 150 years from the time that he begins talking about it. And he talks about them in a language that makes it sound like it's happening right there at that period of time. And I think he's doing this because he's trying to impress upon the people of Israel that even though these events have not taken place, they're going to. And of course, this is what makes Isaiah a prophet, in the fact that these events are going to come true. And the only way they're going to come true is if God has told him to, because of the fact that one of the definitions of a prophet is, a true prophet is that the events will happen. And we know throughout history that he goes so far in his prophecy to name the person who's going to be responsible for the Israelites' return to the city of Jerusalem after their period of captivity. The idea here is that he's trying to impress upon the people the reason that they're going to be taken captive to begin with. And that reason was what? Why were they going to be taken captive? They didn't believe him. Their sin of unbelief. Primary reason is that they're going to be taken into captivity. Now, not only are they going to be taken into captivity on one nation, but then that nation is going to be overthrown, another nation is going to come on the scene, and then still another nation. And this is going to take a long period of time, which I've already mentioned, 150 years or so is going to pass before the prophecy is completely fulfilled, and they're able to return to Jerusalem. So in lesson 1, we learned that Isaiah is prophesying that they will return home. The hope is there, the promise is there. They're going to be returning home. The first half of the book of Isaiah spoke about their going into captivity. The second half teaches about them coming back. The second lesson in this quarter's study was entitled The Servant of God, And this particular lesson talks about who it is that's going to be the Lord's servant in bringing all of these things to the forefront and to fulfillment. And in this particular lesson, we're actually told who it is that's going to be responsible for the Israelite return, and that is King Cyrus. But Cyrus hadn't even been born yet when Isaiah is making his prophecies. So you see that even though he names Cyrus by name in Scripture, this person's not even on the scene yet. So, further indication that the things that he's seen are messages from God. Lesson 3, you're precious. Isaiah's pointing out in this particular lesson that the relationship between the children of Israel and the Lord, which was not a secret relationship, it was true. God had chosen the Israelite people to be His people. And it was through them that the world was going to be saved, in essence, later on. But people, even though they were His chosen people, they weren't always faithful. They did things that were not right in His sight. And because of that, He would punish them. And His punishment was that He would how we say, would turn His back on them and allow them to do things that He didn't want them to do. This is showing two things. Number one, it's showing that people have free will. The second thing is it's showing that if you don't believe and do what God tells you to do, things are not going to go good for you. And so he points out in this particular lesson that they were precious. They were precious in His sight, but at the same time, they were allowed to make mistakes. They were allowed to do things that they weren't supposed to do. And why do you suppose that they were allowed to do this?
Free will.
Free will. But there's a lesson to be learned here, right? Was that they should learn from their own experience that, hey, when I don't do what God tells me to do, things are not going to go good for me. That was a lesson they should have learned. And it's not just beginning then when Isaiah's prophesying. It's been happening since the beginning of the world. They did the same thing back in Noah's time. They did the same thing back in Moses' time. They did the same thing throughout all of history. Back and forward, they would go. They would follow God's rule, follow God's advice, follow His word, and everything would go well. When they quit doing that, things turned bad on them. And it happened over and over and over again. And it's still happening in the world today.
All started in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve.
It all started with Adam and Eve. And Adam and Eve did not do what God told them to do. Things turned bad, right? The outcome was not good. And throughout all of recorded history, this continued to happen that way. When will people learn? That's the question. That's the question that Isaiah is presenting to the Israelite people in this particular time. And it's the question that, of course, is going to come up over and over again. Lesson 4 in our review of our history here, we talk about idols. Lesson 3 hit on idols a little bit, and lesson 4 brings it on out even more. And why do you suppose that people in the world at this particular time had turned to idols? This wasn't the first time, by the way. Why did the Israelites turn
idols. Couldn't see how bad that things are going wrong, so they joined in.
Sonny points out that people around them were worshiping idols, and they couldn't convince them that the Israelites couldn't convince those people that idols were worthless, so they began worshiping themselves. So, you know, it just goes to show that when you're around corruption, you can become corrupted as well. And it wasn't something that was going to change just because of the predicament that they were in. In lesson 4, we talked quite a bit about the idols. We talked about these last week. What good were idols? What could they do? They could do nothing, right? Could they walk? No. Could they talk? No.
Stand up on their own.
Couldn't even stand on their own. They had to be nailed down or hammered down. They had the power to help the people that were worshiping them. Did they even hear what the people were worshiping about? All right. So we see that the idols were just inanimate objects that were there. But why do you think people worship them?
Because they could see,
Because what?
they could see them.
Because they could believe in it. What were they believing in?
I think there's a lot of feelings that go along with it, you know. It made you feel better, so that's why they worship these things. That I feel like this God is going to be taking care of me, so therefore I'm going to try to take care of it. And it's all about feelings, you know.
Feelings. Okay. Yeah, they can see the object. Just sure the people could see the object in front of them. Couldn't see God. That's true, and that's a good point. Feelings. The idea that feelings were, they felt like that idol was helping. It's hard to believe, as we look back in time, in history. It's hard for us to understand this many times, but we see that throughout recorded history, the image or the images that they set up before them that they worship, it gave them the feeling that, good things were happening to them. Especially if good things were happening to them, then they attributed it to power of these idols. Now, there are many religious organizations in the world today, especially in the Far East, who still have idol worship. And we see that even more sometimes when we think about the sorceries and the black magic and things that still exist today, fortune tellers and things of this time. The idea is that, they're giving me information, they're helping me, they're making things happen for me, and they don't really take time to think about, okay, who made the idols? Humans, right? So, mankind. What were they made out of? Wood, stone, metal, gold, silver. So somebody had to shape them into existence, right? So who had more power? The craftsmen that were making the idols, right? Okay, is anything that has been created more powerful than the person that created it? Who created all things? God. So that's the point that many people, even in the world today, miss. They forget that God made everything. mankind, in his infinite wisdom, say his limited wisdom, let's put it that way, can take something, mold it, reshape it into something else. Does that make that object better than it was to begin with? Not really. You just use it to reshape it for another purpose, right? Every day, I work in the construction industry, I guess you might call it, doing different things. And I may build a house, I may remodel a house, a room, or whatever, repair something that's broken, but it's not any better. I mean, yeah, I fixed something that broke, but did I really create something new? I could even take the materials and form it into some other object, but I haven't created anything new. God still created the materials that I use. I just put them together in a different order. Made it fit the purpose that it needed to be used for. But I didn't create the materials to start with. I didn't take nothing and make something out of it. God had that power. He's the only one that does. So even though I may repair something, it's still God that gave me that ability to do that. And I need to remember that. I think that that's the problem that people in this particular time and in the time even now, that we don't think about it. Who gave us the brain power? Who gave us the ability? Who gave us the physical ability to do things, to reshape, to build? It all begins with God, right? Anybody have any comments, questions?
Actually, there was a recognition that there's a higher power. Even though they were misguided in what they did. I'm somewhat critical today of those that have no recognition of a higher power. It's all about self.
Okay, Irving, you bring out a good point. The recognition of higher power, of course, and that's probably leads partially to the idol worship. They were worshiping. They were using a object that they could see to represent an object they could not see. Maybe that's really what was happening, and it probably was. The whole point being that when they're looking upon this object to give them satisfaction or to give them something that they needed, if they got it, then instead of recognizing that it didn't come from that idol, it came from that higher power that they're trying to see, then they lost the connection.
But there are powers of evil as well. I mean, you're saying they can use this to turn people away from God, which they did,
Yeah.
and the same thing today.
Yeah, that's true too. There are. Satan's very powerful. And Satan can lead us astray. Satan can give us what we desire. What we desire is not always good for us, right? So we have to be very careful that we don't get into that situation. Okay, that's kind of a quick review of what we've been covering for the quarter. For the benefit of those who haven't been with us. Now, lesson 5, the idols of Babylon. Our introduction starts out saying that although Isaiah lived more than a century before Judah was taken into Babylonian captivity, he spoke of it in such as it had already occurred. I already mentioned that. The message was certain because he spoke of God and declares it. And God had already revealed to him what was going to take place. Now, Isaiah is trying to teach the people, this is going to happen. He doesn't actually say it's going to happen. He says it in words as if it already happened. But he's teaching them about what's to come. And they're not, I'm afraid, that they're not catching the idea that this is something that Isaiah is teaching them about what's going to happen before it ever even starts. So they don't really understand or don't believe what he's saying. So they're going to continue on in their path down the rabbit hole, so to speak. They're not going to realize that what he is saying is telling them is not going to happen until their children and grandchildren come along. And especially their grandchildren are the ones that's going to live through this particular period in time. For you people in the audience today who have grandchildren, would you want your grandchildren to go through this kind of experience? Be taken into captivity? No, you wouldn't want that, right? So how do we avoid that kind of thing?
Serving God.
Serving God. Those of us who are grandparents now, think back to 50, 60, 70 years ago. Were things in the world more God-fearing than it is today?
I think so. Yes. Respected it more even.
Right. If the people, our grandparents, our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents were more dedicated to God's Word than we are. So think about it. The change that took place from our grandparents' days to now, how much has changed? How much is going to change between us and our grandchildren? And then future ages. Is it going to finally get to a point where nobody's going to even believe in God?
I don't think it'll get that far. I think it'll always be some trying to stand for the truth. But it's going to get worse unless people change.
Okay, you said it, son. It's going to get worse unless people change. And where does the change need to begin? Right now, right? And that's a lesson that everybody needs to hear today. That if we don't make changes in our generation, and the 2 or 3 generations that are already in existence, or coming into existence, then it's going to get a lot worse than it is now. So we need to be kind of disposable. That's what we're here for. That's what God put us here for. The idols that were in existence during the time of Babylon, and we see that from our lesson last week, particularly in our lesson this week, is that Cyrus is going to come on the scene. Now the Babylonians, when the Babylonians came in and took the Israelites Israelites into captivity, they were taken over from another nation, right? Another nation had already put the Israelites in captivity. Babylonians were brought in. God used the Babylonians to free the people from the bondage that they were in before then. So, but what did they do? When the Babylonians took over, what did they do? Did they help the Israelites? They just added more burdens to them, right? Made it worse for them. Now, in a different way, but still, they were captives. They were slaves. And they were treated in such a way that was many times worse than the people before them. Now, Cyrus is going to come along and, Sonny?
I was talking about idol, made me think. The Catholic Church, now their Pope is an idol, because when he comes out, thousands of people together, where he's going to be, they're going to speak to them. Do they look at him as an idol?
They look at him as God.
As God.
They look at him as God on earth.
But he grows old. I've never seen him heal nobody. Never, brought anybody back to life.
Sonny, don't point out the obvious. People don't want to hear it.
Well, I mean, we got idols here today.
Yeah.
People are worshiping.
Yeah, we do. And the Catholic Church, it's not speaking bad of people who believe in the Catholic Church because they believe in what they've been taught. But the idea here is that, we have to be very careful that we don't put a person up on a pedestal in front of us and say, well, that person is the person I need to worship. No. Scripture tells us, call no man what?
But does that mean in a spiritual sense, it is not wrong for me to call my daddy and he's your father?
No. No. We're talking about it in a spiritual sense, but, we are told in Scripture to honor our mother and father. So we have, we've got to differentiate between our Father in heaven and our Father on earth. That's very understandable. The idols of Babylon, we're getting way behind in the time. Questions. Let's look very quickly at our questions. What was the names of the two Babylonian idols? Bel and Nebo. Now these were the two gods, Babylonian gods that were supposed to help the people, and they. We find that in Isaiah's prophecy here that these Babylonian idols are going to be taken somewhere. Where are they going to be taken? They're going to be taken into captivity. Now, if a nation like Babylon has taken the Israelites into captivity, and now their gods are going to be taken into captivity, are they going to be any stronger than the Israelites? Are they going to be any better off than the Israelites? So if the Babylonian gods are going to be taken into captivity, who else is going into captivity with them? The Babylonians, right? those that worship those idols are also going to be taken into captivity. And it says that, Baal's going to bow down, Nebo's going to stoop over. The idea is that, they're going to be torn down. Their power's gone. They're going to be taken into captivity as well. Question 3, what did God promise to do for his people? He's going to take care of it. That's simple. But he goes on, he says, I'm going to hold you, uphold you. And he reminds them, he says, even from your birth, I was with you. I carried you. I lifted you up. And he says, I'm going to continue to do that. Even to your great head. And afterwards. He says, I'm going to continue to watch over you. I'm going to continue to be there for you. But you got to do something new. What do you got to do? Follow his word, right? Be obedient to him. You got to believe in him. You got to have faith that he's going to do what he says he's going to do. Question 4. What does Isaiah say that idols cannot do?
They can't move, they can't talk, they can't deliver.
Yes. They can't move, they can't talk, they can't hear, they can't see, they can't deliver. Idols can do nothing for you. That's what he's telling you. Idols can do nothing, period. Okay, question 5. What is Babylon depicted as? Babylon depicted as? Okay. Virgin daughter, it's pointing out here in this particular verses, there's 2 or 3 verses there that are a little bit kind of hard to understand, but it's showing that Babylon, who has been the virgin daughter, that is, that person that's delicate and tender, is going to be no more. Babylon is going to be turned into a beggar, sitting in the dust, just like a beggar at the gates of the city, no begging for alms. It's going to be turned into a slave, the Babylonians have done to the Israelites. And it's going to be a fugitive, that is, the person who is lost. All right, we're going out of time. Take time, if you will, to read over that particular lesson again, especially the 46 and 47 chapter, and it will give you more insight into what you'll be talking about in lessons to come. Next week, the future's open, God, and we're going to see what's going to happen when the Babylonians are destroyed. Thank you.
The page is not better. The page